show that brings you the best mix of African music in Hamilton and the environs. I am your host for the night, and Ndinda the Mixer. Now, speaking of beautiful Africa, and the first one we're going to share is a wonderful world of beautiful people. I am joined by a fan of Africa in studio today. I'll allow him to introduce himself.
My name is Mutendei from Kenya.
Mutendei. What does Mutendei mean?
Born and died.
Really? Oh. Because, okay, so we're from different tribes in Kenya, because Mutendei in my language would mean a man of action.
Which I also am.
Oh, okay. So you are joining us in the studio because you are a poet, and I'm really excited because you're the kind of African poetry on the show, as much as it's a medium that I love to read and I love to listen to. Could you describe for our listeners what your journey was to poetry?
So, I originally was a writer. I wrote poetry to myself in high school and college. Started out also doing newspaper articles for my college newspaper at Fanshawe. Over the years, I had more time to put into it, and having obtained a lot of, or seen a lot of spoken word artists, and drove me to perform and develop my art better, and that's why I made the shift to being a full-time poet.
Wow, full-time poet?
Pretty much, yes.
Wow, so what is a full-time poet? Is it like the first thing you wake up, you just start writing before you have breakfast, before you even brush your teeth, you're like, I'm a full-time poet. I'm going to write my poetry for the day. How does it work as a full-time poet?
I would say sometimes, yes. It's more so that whenever you're struck with a creative thought or an idea comes to mind, you make sure you put something down and save it for later to develop the concept.
So you're constantly listening to
You can say that, yes.
Okay, so there's different kinds of poets. There are poets who much prefer just to write and performing poetry with sheer act. And there's some who hate the writing aspect but love the performing aspect. What's your favorite? Do you like performing? Do you like writing?
I've come to love both. So originally I was a writer, and performing was the hardest thing for me. I, however, have over the last couple of years been performing and attending many open mic spoken word events, and that's helped me develop my public confidence and be able to better communicate the message I have to the general public.
So when it comes to performing, what do you enjoy the most about performing, and what do you dread?
I love the fact that I'm able to communicate the message and intelligence to my artwork. The thing I would hate the most is not being able to communicate that. So it's always trouble to maintain your footing if you ever miss a line or skip a beat.
Okay. So do you usually perform a cappella? Do you have accompaniment?
For the most part, I do perform a cappella. I have learned to bring in some accompaniment as adds to the message as well as the completeness of the poem and helps to communicate.
It sounds, just because of the conversation we're having, the message is really important. Would you say the message is more important to you than style, or what, like, as a poet, when do you think your job is done? When you've gotten the message, or when you've crafted a beautiful poem that you're like, man, Mutendei, that's a beautiful poem?
Right. So for me, I believe it is when you've gotten the message, and I believe my art should be credible, so that's a big thing that brings my work, and I believe that if you get your message across and present it in the manner that it should be, it'll be beautiful by itself.
And do you have a particular message, or do you find yourself in topics that you tend to write more about?
The art topics I do tend to write more about. I am politically conscious, so that's a big feature of my work. I've also touched on social issues, so I just want to develop the conscious mind.
And when it comes to art, well, and poetry, and being African, there's this prevailing notion that African, let's say parents, are not very gung-ho and they think they can from, hey, out of my calling. Right, like, go calling, go back to school and finish your degree. There's a prevailing notion that a lot of parents tend to not of the art. From your personal experience or just from your interactions with other African artists or poets or basically, is that real that parents tend to struggle? Is that a kids might be going to the
To some extent, yes. I've been blessed to have that great my parents, so that's not something I've had to deal with too much, but it is a case where they're just looking out for your best interest, so while they may encourage you to go into the arts, they want to make sure that you have a stable foundation to launch on, because the art sometimes can be risky.
You're very right. So why don't we listen to a selection? We'll be talking about Mutendei the man. Now let's hear from Mutendei the poet.
So I recently came in, or I had prepared earlier during the week 3 different pieces. However, with the recent events in Kenya, I came up with these pieces just to speak to that and hopefully set some people at ease. So from I want to use called Blood and Soil. So blood flowed, unexpectedly brought down by the surprise crash storm. The storm that struck without warning, having hidden itself on the horizon. And so blood flowed, the storm unexpectedly knocked down those without shelter or protection, striking unmercilessly in all directions. And so at the level of the ensuing flood and spilled blood brought by this flash storm rose, washing over our soil, well, minute by minute, one by one, many were rescued from the turmoil of this flood. And with attempts being made to dam and stem the flood, we've been left with a cesspool that has yet to be drained. But as we move to drain the cesspool, we must remember that those lost and yet unnamed, just like the lines on our coat of arms, our spirits must remain untamed and not broken. And we still have things that have to be spoken about, because there are things that need to be fixed to avoid a repeat of the loss of life caused by a flash storm, a storm that may be sure to come again. And so we must all join to build a better, stronger harbor for the many storms the country Kenya has yet to face. Because I didn't want to get aggravated at what's happening, and you always hope that bad situations like this can resolve right away, but that's not always a fact of life. So not that I'm aiming pointing fingers, but just that we remember that after this aftermath, we have to work better again so it does not repeat itself. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think one of the things what I like about your poem is that it was very realistic. It wasn't talking about an utopia like, oh, never shall there be flash storms again, It was saying, there's more coming just because that's the reality of our world. And it's up to us to make sure that we have a safe harbor. We have a place of safety and a place, I don't know. You're the point here.
That's very true. And I just hope that every dark clouds a silver lining. I hope people realize that we have to be more involved with our own society and the administration.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So do you find poems are cathartic for you when you write? If you're going through some turmoil, do you find they help release those emotions? For example, after you finish writing that poem, did you feel a little bit better? Or
I did feel a bit better. I believe that poems sometimes are music without music, right? So it has that soothing effect. It touches your soul and can also educate and entertain you.
Awesome. So, speaking of poetry, you're quite the accomplished poet. You have a book. I believe this is your first book or anthology?
It's been a work in progress. So I've had a mini collection of different books that came out over the years. I would say this is my first official book of my compilation poetry. Okay.
So it's called The Poetry Express, and this is the first volume. It's called What Would I Want to Be? What prompted you to put it together?
I just felt that as an artist, you want to make sure you come from a solid platform, and I wanted to show the diverse range of my artwork, and be a first step to becoming a published author and develop a series that people can relate to, and some of them form a model for other artists out there.
Okay. So was it self-published or?
Yes, it was self-published.
Yeah, so that's quite the challenge. How was that process? Were you your own editor?
I was my own editor to a little extent. I must admit I had to obviously get some other people's advice for a devil's advocate, because you're it's not good to be your own critic because you miss a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean the poems are all your babies, right? So it's hard to choose between this poem and the other poem.
True.
So what can people expect? Like if they were to buy or pick up a copy of Poetry Express, what are some topics that? Oh, I just opened. Sorry, guys. I was just flipping through the book and I saw a particularly curiously titled poem, Shisha and Tea. So, care to elaborate, Mutendei?
So, with a big part of the book, I want to make sure that through my poems, I cover a wide range of subject matters, make it entertaining as well as reach a broad range of readers. So I don't want to just stick on one particular focus, and I want the poems to be as captivating as possible. So which is why I came up with Shisha and Tea.
What's Shisha and Tea about?
Okay. So I guess when I read it and I'll explain a little about it after, it'll kind of speak for itself. Okay. With the sweet mint water needed to cool the fire of the shared pleasures of the Shisha. Through the smoke of the fire we shared our knowledge, experiences, and intimacies. And within each breath that we inhaled, we solidified our memories of the moment which we washed deeper into the core of our being through the sweet tea that came to represent our connection. And so we inhaled and drank more and more, becoming closer and full of the moment as we transposed ourselves and our dual emotions through the Shisha and Tea. And so we continued for the most part uninhibited in this fashion until we could not distinguish between ourselves which one of these we both wore. And our dual identities mirrored each other. I was the fire carried forward and heralded by the smoke, while she was the cool, calm, pleasurable tea, rich in spirit. And within and through this interaction, I still remembered that you learn something from everyone you meet. And in the end, it was clear that without one of us, neither one of us or the other could ever be. And so the student and the teacher both carry each other on each other's back. These words are not just fiction, but fact.
Wow. That's beautiful. So we're going to take a quick musical break, and when we come back, we're going to talk maybe just about, I know you had a poem called The African Leader, so we're going to talk a little bit about African leaders, their strengths and weaknesses, and all the different incarnations they come in. Right now we're going to listen to Chiwoniso. She's one of Zimbabwe's foremost female artists. She performed in Afrofest a few years ago, and this is off of her album called Rebel Woman. The song is Only One World. You're listening to Town2Cairo, the show that brings you the best mix of African music in Hamilton and the environs. And tonight's guest on the show is Mutendei Achaya.
Yes, glad to be here.
And stay tuned for more on African poetry and the chance to listen to more of Mutendei's work, and also to find out about a poetic event he'll be holding in Toronto soon, in the next few weeks, right?
Yes.
Alrighty. Chiwoniso with Only One World. Listening to Town2Cairo. We are back with Mutendei Achaya and Mutendei. Okay, I don't know. I really enjoy saying all three names. I feel like if I just say Mutendei, it's just like Mutendei. Okay, what does Achaya mean?
Achaya is a Luya word that means
seriously, you my friend, your name so they don't joke, huh? And what does that mean?
That's my family name. No, it's the name.
Strong name for myself. So actually, I forgot to bring this up in the last segment that we did. So you have a production company called
that has been focused for the most part on my poetry. I've also been helping.
Oh wow!
Yes.
So you're quite the busy guy.
Trying to be. Yeah.
How do you do it all?
Very little sleep during the week, crash on the weekends, and just keep motivated.
Wow. So we had a chance to hear, and I like the different poems that we did so far. They're very different. Like Blood and Soul, of course, it's very poignant, it's very profound. it's about life and death, and that's always,
Yes.
a subject that moves people. And then we had Shisha and Tea, and we were having this conversation during the song was playing, whether it was self-explanatory. I thought it was self-explanatory. Well, but Shisha and Tea is like romantic, right? I'm guessing.
It's a bit romantic. It kind of takes you one way, but then when you get the meaning of the actual poem, it leads in a different direction. So it talks about the learning experience that is shared to build a student or build the next generation. Everyone has to work together, and in the learning experience, you really can't stand alone, which is why I said you learn something from everyone you meet.
Great. So we're talking about poetry, and especially poetry in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area. And you're putting together an event on October 4th. Could you tell us a little bit more about the event?
Yeah, so the event I'm putting together is the first part of a poetry tour that I'm hoping to launch called Fruit, Wine, and Poetry. So it'll be a themed event featuring select pieces from myself, Adam Word Mason, D-Nice, and hosted by Mike Microphone. Yeah, so we're getting different elements, male and female perspective, just hoping to have an all-encompassing event.
Excellent. And what made you think, I should put this together?
I've just always wanted to be able to launch something successfully, and I felt that this was the best platform at the time, not just to showcase myself, but the other artists out there, and just try to set a standard for a new poetry event.
Okay. So it sounds to me, and mind you, it's the first time I'm meeting you, but it sounds to me that you're forever trying to up the ante on yourself. You're forever challenging yourself and doing new things. Is that part of your personality, or is it something you intentionally say, I have to grow as a poet? What's the next thing that I need to do to challenge myself?
It's a bit of both, because one of my poems I wrote in the Poetry Express speaks to always testing your limits, right? You never really know yourself until you challenge yourself, and you only live once, so if you want to do something, it's either you do it or you don't. There's really no in-between. So that's something I took to heart, and I always want to grow and test my capabilities and be the best I can be.
Okay, very well said. Now back to the Poetry Express that we were just talking about. African leaders. We love to hate them, we hate to love them. I think every African, and some people who are not necessarily African, have a love-hate relationship with the political leaders of that continent. What's your take, for example, just on African leaders in general? Right now we have quite a gamut in Africa. We have the longest reigning dictator. Hey Mugs, Mugabe, how you doing? We have some fresh blood. We have the Liberian the world's first ever female president. Well, Africa's first female president. We have some new youngins. Technically, Uhuru is one of the new guard. He uses Twitter. We have Kagame, who people, apparently the West also seems to really admire his leadership style. What's your take on all these different people?
Okay. So I believe in African politics, it's a unique brand than anywhere else, because they have a lot to deal with in terms of colonial heritage, the generation gap, and becoming modernized. We are coming to the age of what is perceived as the end of the African strongman. We do still have a few holdouts, but I do believe democracy is taking place. The thing is that it will be a definitely tough balancing act for anyone who steps in their shoes, and I don't envy them, because heavy is the head that wears the crown. So you have to deal with the economy, deal with government, you have to deal with still your colonial heritage, as well as the ethnic tension or ethnicity of regions. Right.
I think too, because when I think, for example, of the country of Kenya, where I grew up, any new leader, as much as they're also dealing with the colonial heritage, and some people might argue that bribery and corruption are part of that legacy, it's such a catch-22, because it's hard to make it in politics on your own. You always owe someone something, and half the time you can't make it unless you owe the incumbents. You know what I mean? So it's hard to really sweep the chicken coop, because you're part of the problem. I find that especially Kenyans, we have this idea that if we vote in someone who's clean and fresh and has no baggage, that they'll come and clean out the house. And the more you start reading about the inside machinery of politics, you realize you can't do it alone. There's people there, there's institutions that have survived on corruption for so long that if you were to take corruption out, the government would fall. Which is sad. It's painful for me to think about stuff like that.
Well, that is a sad reality. And speaking specifically to corruption, corruption in every government anywhere in this world does exist. The things that and this is my own perspective, not to paint out in a bad light, the thing that I noticed that with African leaders, they don't realize that there's a tipping point. So you can only push corruption so far before you break the system. And sadly, in a lot of countries, that's what's happened.
I have to agree with you too. I remember when I was younger reading an article, and I was like, are you serious? When it comes to corruption and African leaders. So there are Kenyan leaders who owned a huge spread, a huge ranch in Argentina, and Argentina is known for its world-class beef. And property prices there are not cheap. Running an operation there is not cheap. But this was a Kenyan leader who could afford to run and own a ranch in Argentina. And it was it was one of the many examples where, even with your corruption, and this is going to sound a little bit trite, but if you're going to be corrupt, at least invest in your backyard. But one of the problems we have is, you're corrupt, you go put it in a Swiss bank account where if you die, no one knows it's there. It's lost to the country forever. Or you go and invest in every other country except your own. And I remember reading an academic paper that compared, I think it was Malaysia and Ghana, because they got independence around the same time. And they're saying Malaysia was just as corrupt, if not more corrupt than Ghana. Right. But the difference was their leaders invested the stolen money or whatever back in Malaysia, whereas the Ghanaian leaders at that time were not investing in Ghana. And it was sad because that was the reality, you know. Anyway, I always start going on rants when it comes to politics. So you have a poem called The African Leader that I really want to hear your take on our wonderful friends.
Okay, so the African leader speaks to the identity of an African leader and the disconnect they have both from the general public as well as the community at large. Alright, so it will be a bit of a lengthy poem, but bear with me. It was a new day, my day. I, the African leader, stood proud, adorned in the bright and renewed hopes and expectations of all. And I looked over the crowds gathered and smiled at all their attentions. And I was surrounded by old and new, aunts, fathers, regents, institutions, citizens and acquaintances, who had all waited 5 long years for a new sun to rise, proud to greet distant neighbors. And they had waited and hoped for a new sun to meet their expectations, a new sun to shine, bringing peace, unity, prosperity, and renewed devotion to good governance and improvement for the benefit of all. 5 long years Africa had waited in dismay at the failed promises of past terms. 5 long years of waiting, during which I and others like me, in the present and the past, who would call ourselves leaders, had left much unfulfilled. And as a leader I wondered to myself, was it because of my lack of trying that we did not fulfill all that we had forecasted? I had simply attempted to mirror myself as those before me, adorning and painting myself as a proud lion, a symbol of authority, a means to an end, free to stroll unchallenged across the plains. But what end was achieved with the means? I recalled a distant neighbor asking me in a loud voice, a roaring voice, that I only heard as a whisper. And it further puzzled me as to why I had held him so distant. But the past was the past, and why would I waste my time concerning myself with the past? Then another roaring whisper came to my ears. A faulty past, not corrected, can never give rise to strong foundations for the future. And so my handheld fly whisk swiped the pesky noise away from my ear as I contemplated the viability of new relationships and new directions. Or should I stick to my old and proven ways? And as I pondered this, those around me, also leaders, mirrored my very position. And I thought to myself how to create an image to inspire, a means for improvement. But in so doing, I could not see anywhere beyond myself. And I could not say for the life of me whether my vision was obscured by memories of the past or by those around me. And as yet, I still contemplated a dream, but was hard-pressed in bringing that dream to reality. As the clock neared midday sun, and all the while I heard my distant neighbor's voice roar in a whisper once more, and they inexplicably seemed to have moved farther away from me. Where does such a path take you and those that follow you? Because you preached of raising mountains, but you haven't really erected anything beyond what already existed. Lifted up by others that you have forgotten, that built the path you now trample upon. You said you would bring us closer to the sun, but at midday all the people feel the shadows. So on what basis do you make your decisions? As they spoke, I stood silent and unmoving, thinking to myself, who do I make decisions for, and for whose sake? what direction should I take, and who would accompany me for the ride. And I faced this decision at another crossroad of opportunity, legacy, and history, having to consider acting now or later, and by what basis were those who questioned me deserving of my attention, if at all equal merit and consideration was to be given to all. And yet the voices of my distant neighbors inexplicably moved further and further away as the clock moved on to sunset, and I inexplicably continued to stand still, because did it even matter? Was my decision meant to be a personal discovery, or to fulfill my commitments for the benefit of others? Would I be right putting my wants before those of others? And should I heed their words, or was decision-making solely my personal affair? I was, after all, chosen to be the leader, and this is Africa, TIA, and should I not act like a royal king of old, my main concern being the fealty of my subjects in gold? So what made my title so important, and what was my purpose in making decisions? Was the choice made what it should have been? Was my choice influenced by society or by my positions in society? Was it influenced by those who came before me or by those falling behind me? And perhaps I should have deferred the choice to those of younger years, those who saw things differently, the younger generations. Perhaps my vision may have become skewed, having been here for so long. And should I have chosen for the past, present, or future? How would this define my legacy and those around me? Which of these factors should have been the first or last reason for making any of the choices I had? And my neighbors' voices could hardly be heard, inaudible whispers as they were, as the sun fell. And then, as the sun fell, I then realized it was not them who had moved to a distance, but it was me. But it did not even matter, because I was the sun, and the clock had moved to sunset. And so tomorrow, I had a new day, and the sun would rise proud to greet distant neighbors who came after receiving flowery invitations. Distant neighbors who hoped for a new sun to shine the sunlight of hope. A sun to meet the expectations of old aunts, fathers, regents, institutions, and countrymen and women and acquaintances, who had still waited another 5 long years for the sun to rise and shine on all to bring peace, prosperity, and renewed devotion to good governance and improvement for the benefit of all. And then I heard the last of my distant neighbors' inaudible whispers. Why have high hopes? What makes this leader any different from any of the others at all? Well, nothing at all. Because these flowery invitations and promises will soon rot, be discarded and forgotten, just like the people this leader looks down upon. And at these words I paused for a moment and then resumed my usual character, because for the life of me, I could not see why they were bothered or displeased. I was the sun, and they were basking in my sunlight. I was the African leader.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to cut that short. That was Mutendei Nabutete, and the poem is called
I, the African Leader.
I, the African Leader, which is off of his book, The Poetry Express, Volume 1, What Would I Want to Be? Now, we are running really short of time, but maybe you could give some details for people who might want to come to the event. Where is it? What time does it start? And where can they get tickets or more information?
Right. So the poem is going to be at 326 Parliament, Quincy's Restaurant, on Friday, October 4th. Tickets can be bought online by email through an e-transfer to Makin, that's M-A-K-N, Productions at Outlook.com, or by purchasing tickets directly from the store Sunday or Monday, and there will be tickets available at the door. It's better to get early tickets, as there will be $15. Tickets at the door will be $20.
Okay. And what time does the event start?
Starts at 7:30.